Since the time before time, or 2001, depending on who's counting, Makuta has been the arch nemesis of our Toa heroes. The cold, calculating villain hiding in the shadows. Well, in Bionicle G2, Makuta spent a bit too much time in the shadows, because LEGO never even let his set see the light of day after teasing him for years. Today, I'm fixing that by building us a custom G2 Bionicle Makuta worthy of his name. Let's start things off by building his body. I want to use these torso armor parts for his shoulders. To connect the pair of them together, I'll add some pin axles, and then we can use these flip-flop beams to attach them together. This seems properly spiky for our Lord of Shadows. For his chest, I'm going to use even more torso armor parts, this time some transparent purple skeleton shells. We just need to build up some structure to connect them in. Let's add a bunch of these connectors to this Technic axle. And while we're at it, let's add some connection points for Makuta's shoulders. To attach that purple shell, let's add some lift arms to this stopper axle, and then a ball on a beam can give us a spot to attach the shell. Let's stop it from spinning freely with another axle and a lift arm. For the shoulder joints, let's use another stopper axle and a ball joint. Now, let's connect our sub-assemblies together. Afterwards, we can attach that into our shoulder assembly, and we can add the all-important transparent purple shells. We'll cap them off with some hexagons. To make Makuta's armor a little more ornate, I think it'd be cool to incorporate this golden skull spider mask. As any true Bionicle fan knows, spiders have 4 legs. So let's snap them in here, and then add some ornamental blades and spikes to round them out. I think that'll look pretty sweet once it's incorporated into the chest. But at the risk of making things even sweeter, I think it'd be awesome to add some of these Captain Phasma cape parts to either side of the skull spider. There's a handy Technic connector, which fits a 2015 Bionicle mask perfectly. I'll use that here to attach our spiders. But before doing that, we should build up some surrounding structure. To start, let's add some pins and a beam to our connector. Next, let's add an axle, and then add some round plates and a pair of boat studs. Let's properly center this before we can use the stoppers as a spot for our capes to attach into. We can now test fit it with our skull spider. Looking good. Let's go back to the structure so that we can figure out a way that this can attach into the rest of the body. Let's use this Mantex shoulder armor here on the chest. I'll attach in a system slope to nicely frame the spider mask. For a structural spine, let's turn to our trusty bent Technic beam. There we can connect an axle and a pair of connectors. Afterwards, some pins will allow for this to nicely attach into the rest of our chest build. To the spine here, we can pin these lift arms in place. Let's add a connector to that, and then an axle can hold this elbow and pin axle. I'll attach a copy of this assembly to the other side. The pins we added in will be perfect for connecting this into the shoulder assembly we built earlier. Let's add the capes in later, because something's telling me that it'll drive me crazy if we add them in now. We're starting to get somewhere, but I think it's time to hit the gym and build up Makuta's traps. I'd like them to be cartoonishly large, so that we get a cool silhouette in the final build. Let's add some connectors to this next structure, so that after adding a bunch of pins, we have a way to connect it into the flip-flop beams on the shoulders. Now, we have room for those traps. This pin axle can connect in one of these newer Technic panels. I have a new expensive habit of buying Technic cars every time I go to Costco, and it's clearly starting to pay off because these panels are perfect here. Let's add in a mirrored trap, and then build up the front of his neck with some more of these stolen Bugatti panels. To clip these in, we just need to do some minor reconstructive surgery on both shoulders. Now, we just need to fill in this middle section. I'll use a rod end, a bar, and a connector, which can clip into the top of the skull spider mask. Now it's time to turn our attention to our tyrannical thug's tummy, where another skeleton shell would complement the ones on his chest. We can connect it in by adding some lift arms and a ball on a beam part. Then, on his back, we can start in on a structure to attach the hips. Let's add some yummy tummy macaronis while we're at it. For the hips themselves, we can attach a bunch of lift arms and 4 ball joints to this axle. Then, I'll add some more connectors 2 of which can receive axles. This allows for them to attach into the rest of our build. To round out the torso, some more of these spiky armor plates would be perfect. To attach them in at the correct angle, I'll use a ball and socket joint. Then, I'll add a pin axle, and we can pop them into place. I think it's now time for those Captain Phasma capes. With some minor open heart surgery, we can connect the capes into his chest. Then, reattach the all-important skull spider. I'm worried now that the torso gets a bit lost in the black of the Phasma capes. The solution is, of course, more capes. I'll use these little ball joint stoppers to attach in this dark red cape part. I think the red gives some nice contrast with the torso and stops it from all bleeding together. Let's continue the wizard robe look here with some of these propeller blades. First, we can add some half pins to the blade. Next, let's attach some clips and a wedge plate. We can hold 2 of these rotor assemblies together with a rod. Next, to continue the dark red detailing from the Phasma capes here, we can use some of these red flex tubes. To attach them, I'll connect a round plate and lock it in with some slopes. Now, we can use a rod and a skelly arm to connect the top of the flex tube. We just need a way to attach the bottom end of the tube. For that, let's add this half pin and pin axle connector to this tube. There we can join an axle and connector, before adding a rod with a rod end. Then this bar clip can snap in. We can now attach that between the 2 rotor blades and afterwards clip in the other end of the red flex tube. Then we can mirror that over to the other side of the robe. One last thing I want to do here is cover up these pins. We can accomplish that with this Chima feather. I'll attach a clip and 2 hollow studs to connect in the feather. For some final touches, let's attach a hexagon here and add a robot hand to connect this into the torso. There, I'll add this pin, which the robe can connect into. Let's continue the robe by building up some little assemblies with these Technic panels. I'll connect some half pins here, and then we can attach a round tile and a hexagon. For an attachment point, we can use this axle connector and a ball joint. On the socket side, I'll connect some of these little lift arms and a decorative elephant trunk. Then we can snap in the Technic panel assembly. Let's attach those in and swing the robe into place. I want to make a little tribute here to the original depiction of Makuta with this infected mask, which I just found out were hand painted, so each one's a little different. Let's find a way to hang this off his hip. For that, I think some of these chain links could be perfect. Actually, let's go all out and make a belt out of the chain links. Let's thread our mask on, and then hang the whole thing around Makuta's waist. For some finishing touches, let's first cover up his butt with this bullrock visor. Then, we can add some strength by spanning his back with a beam. Here, let's use a pair of sockets to sandwich a Technic beam, which we can connect in with some pin axles, before locking in the free end with an axle. And with that, the torso is done, and we can turn our attention to constructing Makuta's head. The G2 Bionicle line was supposed to have 3 unique legendary masks of power, but in the end, they only released 2 of them. The third, Mask of Ultimate Power, never saw the light of day, but was supposed to belong to Makuta. We actually know what it would have looked like, thanks to concept models displayed by the Bionicle team. Bringing that to life is where Bamboo Lab, the sponsor of today's video, and their amazing X1C printer comes in. For the longest time, in order to get a half-decent 3D print, you had to buy insanely expensive 3D printers, or pay someone else who had one. But no more. Bamboo has seriously changed the game with affordable, accurate printers. I've used a lot of 3D printers over the years, working as an engineer, but the Bamboo Lab X1C is the first printer I've used that just works. Bamboo Lab has done away with everything that used to make 3D printing challenging, and delivered a tool that that you can use to make cool stuff. Like this unreleased Mctoran arm prototype, remodeled by MakerWorld user Scamdex, which can hold tools and weapons. And this new printer is seriously fast, setting a new benchmark for the speed a reliable and accurate printer can achieve. It's crazy how quickly a model goes from something on your computer screen to a real tangible part in your hands. 3D printers have finally reached the point where they're easy to operate and extremely useful tools that help you create, thanks in large part to Bambu Lab. Their printers are seriously just that great. Bambu is currently running their biggest sale of the year with huge Black Friday discounts until December 3rd. It's the best time to add a 3D printer to your collection. Click the link in my description or scan the QR code on screen to see all Bambu Labs has to offer. Thanks, Bambu. And here's the finished print for the Mask of Ultimate Power. It was designed by the talented Mod20087. To get this high level of detail, I ended up swapping to a 0.2mm print nozzle and was able to get some pretty great detail on the runes. It's a great match to the official Mask of Creation, and the beauty of it being a 3D print is that I can scale it up to match my huge build. With all that figured out, I want to see how the runes look in black. I can actually do that in a single print with the automatic material system from Bambu. With the print done, let's go get our mask. Pretty insane how much detail we're able to get in a single print. Now, since I scaled up this mask, I'll have to get creative with how it connects into the rest of the head. Let's start building that up with this lift arm, which I'll add 2 more lift arms to. Then some eyes in the form of these bar plates. After, we can clip in the mask. Next up, I want to add some additional horns to the mask. I also want to add in a neck joint while we're at it, so let's connect that in with some more lift arms and axles. For the horns themselves, let's add a robot hand to the base part. Then add this smaller spike to thicken it up. After, we can attach that into this shell. Back on the head, I'll add some ball joints and clip the horns in. With that, the head is done, and we can move on to building up a giant sword for our villain. I think it would only be fitting for Bionicle's biggest baddie to wield LEGO's biggest blade. And so, I want to find a way to use this absolutely gigantic wing from the Dune Ornithopter. First, we can attach in this coat hanger lift arm with some half pins. Then, I'll add some connectors using several axles. Here, let's connect some robot hands, then a pair of minifigure axes can round out the crossguard. Let's distinguish this wing just a little from the standard Ornithopter wing by adding this small blade part. To attach it, I'll use an axle coupler and a Technic connector. There, a half pin will connect it into our coat hanger part. With that installed, we can lock things together with a lift arm. I'm avoiding using another coat hanger so that we'll have some connection points to pin in another lift arm for the hilt. Let's extend the hilt by attaching in a flip-flop beam. I'll add a bunch of half pins here so that we can tile the beam off. At the pommel, I'll use some more robot hands to attach one more axe blade. Or at least try to. Let's give it another go. For a finishing touch, let's bedazzle this sword with some blue hexagons. Then, we can add one last connector to make sure that Makuta can hold his sword. And it's looking ready to get me an additional security screening with the TSA. For Makuta's arms, I want to continue the purple energy look we had going on with his torso. These alien pod parts should be perfect to keep the theme going. I'll connect a round plate to give us a hole for this stopper axle ball joint assembly. For the elbow joint, let's use this socket, which I'll connect some Technic cams and an axle connector to. Then, I'll attach in some more lift arms from my rapidly depleting supply. Next, let's add an axle and a ball joint to connect in this shell. On the other side, I want to attach this Wanua head part. For that, I'll connect a half pin inside of it before slotting in a lightsaber rod, which this robot hand can clip into. This assembly can then connect into the lift arms we added earlier. One more connector will allow for our purple energy to join the party. With the forearm done, let's construct some Makuta mitts. First, I'll add 3 robot arms to this elite octagon. After, let's clip in robot hands, and then these rod ends. Finally, it's time for some menacing claws. I'll round out the back of his hands with a round plate and some clips. To them, I'll attach this shoulder armor part. For the wrist joint, I'll add in an axle and a socket. And for his thumb, let's build up a little rod end robot hand thingy. Let's connect that in to complete Makuta's hand. For his upper arms, I think these golden armor parts would be perfect for bicep armor. They'll be even cooler if we can add some purple energy behind them. Let's figure out how to connect these together. The easiest way I could find to do that was to use this lift arm and some pins. Next, for the structure of the arm, let's use this aptly named bone and a friction extender. I'll add some connectors to these axles. Let's clip a beam in order to connect this Metru shoulder armor. To connect in the bicep, we can use a pair of pins. On the backside, let's attach a shell and an add-on in order to round out the upper arm. With that, we can combine the upper and lower arms before accessorizing Makuta, like the swifty he is, by giving him some gold friendship bracelets. They'll be held in place by his large hands. And with that, the arms are done, and I think it's only appropriate that we make another reference to the original Makuta by incorporating his Mask of Shadows. Maybe we can turn this mask into a little bat companion for Makuta. I'm gonna call him Terry. First, we're gonna need to give Terry some eyes. To do that, let's connect a pair of bullrock eyes to this triaxle. They look good, but now we need to come up with some way of attaching these two randomly angled axles together. Let's do that by sandwiching these little connectors between a pair of rounded plates. With that done, let's connect the Mask of Shadows in. Next up, I want to add these cute little wings. We'll take the mask back off for a second and add in a bar. There, a robot hand and a skelly arm can give us a place to clip in the wing. I'll cap it off with a spike, and we can attach the other wing in. I'll replace the mask, and then we can start to think about giving Terry a toothy grin. For that, I'll clip a spike into this robot arm, and then connect in a rod end. That can then clip into our existing rod, and the teeth can swing into place. For the lower jaw, let's use this fur bit. It has some random holes I can shove these spikes into. Then to connect the jaw, I'll use a skelly arm and an Among Us plate with an inkwell. The inkwell can connect into the center of that triaxle to finish off Terry's smile. Let's build up a quick stand with this stopper axle and a ball joint. Then I'll connect an axle coupler, followed by this clear stand part, which I can cap off with a rod end. That rod end can then clip into Terry's head, so we can have him flying over Makuta's shoulder. Okay, so these are the drawers I've been using to store my parts for years. But they have this annoying issue, where these dividers allow parts to slip under and mix together if I'm not careful. To fix this, I've designed some bin inserts, which fixes that problem and allows for me to easily remove the bins to get access to them. I've done this with both my small and large bins, and it's really brought my part storage to the next level. I've uploaded these bins to MakerWorld if you want to print them out yourselves. While you're at it, you can check out the thousands of other prints MakerWorld has to offer. Back to Makuta. I want his legs to mirror the arms we built, so let's use some more alien pods. They actually fit together pretty perfectly with these wheels. It's a weak connection though, so we'll need to build up some internal structure. We can center that around this stopper axle, which I'll connect a ball joint to. Then, let's thread on a lift arm and a bushing, which this tire can fit around. Next, let's add a rounded plate for the purple pod to connect into. Although we won't really see it, I'll build up a core for inside the pod using this cone part. We can slide that on, and then add in a lift arm and a pin in order to attach the Technic wheel. For the knee joint, I'll connect 2 pin axles and a pair of Titan sockets. On the other side of the wheel, I'll use a pair of pins to connect some Technic panels. Now, flipping this around to the back side, I'll add 2 of these little connectors, which can use some pins in order to attach these old school Technic panels. If you thought there was no way that little ball joint would be sturdy enough to support the ankle, I agree. We should strengthen that up by adding a signature Bionicle leg piston with the stopper axle, ball joint, and piston body. I'll attach that in with this connector and a pair of lift arms, using the pinhole to connect the piston so that it spins freely. Let's clip that in. For the knees, I'll go with the classic double ball joint Technic cam sandwich, which I love for the strength and flexibility it gives the knee joint. And for his knee armor, let's use these cool new Ninjago parts. I swear there's someone on LEGO's part design team who's been doing Matt and Nui's work, keeping Bionicle building alive with some of these new parts. For his upper leg, let's begin with this Toa torso. I'll flip it around and add this golden armor. For some more purple energy, we can include this shell. To attach it, I'll connect this ball and a beam part. For the hip joint, we can double up some ball sockets to make things more stable. Usually, I have the ball joints here in line with one another, but unless I add another axis of revolution to rotate the legs out, we can end up with some awkward posing in the finished model. But if we instead offset these ball joints, we can actually get a natural angle built into the design. It looks more nasty than it is. I don't think it stresses out the parts too much, just the people in the comments. To connect the joint in, let's add an L-beam before pinning things together and locking it in with another beam. For the sides of the leg, we should employ another of these spiky armor parts. To add that, let's connect another pair of quarter ellipses with pin axles. The axle ends of them allow for the armor to attach in before sliding it onto the leg. To add some bulk on top of the legs, I have these large shells that we can use. I'll connect a pair of ball joints to this pin axle, then we can snap on the shell and add it in. For the knee joint, I'll again double up some sockets. Then, a couple of lift arms can give us a spot to add some connectors in. That should fit here perfectly. We just need to build up some connective structure. First, I'll thread on some axle connectors. Then, a knee joint can slide in. To lock it in, we can use these stoppers. And for a little more strength, let's add 2 pin axles, which can receive some Technic cams to lock the assembly together. For the back of the leg, I have this huge dinosaur jaw that we can use. To attach it, I'll add some axle connectors into the mix. That'll connect to the back of the knee joint and swing into place to complete the upper legs. For the feet, let's begin with my favorite prefab foot part. I'll clip in some robot hands so that these bullrock eyes can fit in. I'd like to add this golden armor here, so for that, let's attach another robot hand and then a rounded plate. We can give the ankles some more strength with a friction extender. Next, we need to add some friction to the bottom of the feet. This time, I'm going to use a Lego tire to do that. A pair of axles can secure it into place. But it sticks out a little too much still. To fix that, I'll shove this too long bar through the top side. Let's take that golden armor off for a second, so that we can further build up the foot with some Technic panels and lift arms. Here, I'll add a second socket for the leg piston to connect into. Let's lock that in, and then we can replace the golden armor and assemble Makuta's leg. First, connecting the 2 leg sections together. Then, attaching the foot and snapping in the leg piston. I'm pretty happy with the range of motion we can get with his leg, but now it's time for the final assembly. We can begin by attaching Makuta's head. Then, let's clip in his arms. We can follow that up by connecting in his legs. Then, I'll give him his giant sword. Finally, let's get Terry attached, and it's time for the beauty shots. Thanks to all the amazing people supporting me over on Patreon. You are the building blocks that make this channel possible. If you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this one too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, happy building.